Alright folks, let's get the show on the road for today. We're going to have a look at our inventory, or product available as we called it, from yesterday. So, what we have is a list of products, and basically we need a cost for those products. So basically what we've done in the meantime is given ourselves a default set of values, and this makes these different buildings available. Now if we remove those buildings and we reset these values, then basically what will happen is these values will become unavailable. So we have this array with two elements, and those elements are from a structure called supply, and it gives us a cost. In this case we have the same structure, but this is the item quantity that we have in hand at the moment. So we have our bauxite 40 and our copper rich ore 40. So basically if we change these to 20, we can immediately see the difference, because, and once we see it I'll explain it. So what we have is these two are now active, these buttons are now active, and these two buttons are not active. Now that is because these two buttons here cost 10 and 20. Now as you've seen earlier, I changed how much we had in our inventory to 20, so these are available. So these two are not, because this one costs 30 and this one costs 40. So what we want to do now is we want to create an inventory which shows us what we have on hand. Now our inventory, this is the first iteration, remember, so this is going to be the crafting section, and this is going to be our inventory section. Okay, now basically all it is canvas panels, and then a uniform grid panel with two vertical boxes, and these two vertical boxes are going to contain grid panels which are actually going to store or display our inventory and what we can actually craft. So let's move forward. The first thing we're going to do in here is we're actually going to create a text box. As I said, this is us just prototyping it out, so this could very well change. And excuse me 1 second just while I invite a couple of people to the stream. It'll just be 2 seconds. So I haven't quite decided yet if we shall display all the different products that we can actually have in our inventory, or just the ones that we actually have, and similarly on the crafting side to display only the ones that we can actually make and actually have the resources to make, or to just show all the ones that we can make. So we're going to have to decide on that. and then we're going to have to fill it out. So in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll duplicate this and then we'll move it to this vertical box. So let's zoom in a bit so that you guys can see it a bit better. And we'll make this a little bit bigger so you guys can, again, can see that a little bit better of what's going on. So for both of these, what we're going to do is we're going to change the text to our standard, and we're going to make it a bit bigger. Go for 36. Looks good to me. And we shall say where house, and then we can say, let's say craft in hand. Okay, so now we have our two boxes, vertical panels, and what we're going to do is we're going to add two grid panels. Okay, and we're going to add it to the vertical box, except we need to actually add it to the vertical box, and we do the same thing over here. And we're going to turn these into variables so that we can actually interact with them, and we can call it GP underscore inventory and is variable. Okay, and exactly the same thing here. Call it GP for grid panel underscore, and let's say we'll call it crafting. Okay, so we now have our two variables of grid panels, and we can start adding widgets to those grid panels. Hey Jerome, how you doing, mate? How are you today? Right, so anyway, that wasn't to be offhand with you, Jerome, by the way. I'm just trying to get my thoughts. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have to make these slightly smaller, because what we want is to have a button down here, okay, which is going to say basically close. We're actually going to need a button over here as well, and here, or actually we don't need a button in here, but we do need a button in here, because we're going to need a button that says like build or craft or whatever. So, but anyway, let's actually start with what we actually need. Now, do we, and I think we do, we've actually got a button that we could use for this. Now, I'll show you what I'm talking about. We've got a similar button in this case, right? So, if I remember rightly, it's going to be in here. We may copy this actually because it's a different operation. We may need to change this. So let's have a look at this. Now the point being that this is it here. This is the button here, the inputs, bauxite quantity 1. So we have got something similar, okay? Now this padding we do not like, but we can change that shortly. So anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into our, actually, you know what, you know what we've got to remember here is we've got a recipe, okay? And this is the actual recipe, and that's the button at the top, and this is the recipe inputs, and that gives us our quantity. So what we could actually do in this case is copy this, and then in our inventory we can create a new widget, and we can call it W, and then inventory item, okay, and we can basically delete that, and we can paste that. Now we can change the names of this: button inventory. Actually, the funny thing is here, we aren't actually going to do anything with this, because this button isn't going to do anything, right? But basically this isn't going to do anything at all, and the input name and quantity is fine. So that's cool, we can leave it at that. So let's go about doing our actual grid. So if we go back here and we go to graph, and we can delete the pre-construct. We aren't doing it on pre-construct, we'll just do it on construct. So first thing, as usual, we always like to do is create a variable called controller, and then we just basically get the player controller and we cast it to the FE controller, which is our Fabrica Espace controller. Then we drag our controller and we change it to an FE controller. So this variable is now of the type FE controller. We're getting the controller, we know it's an FE controller. So basically what we can do is we can set this now to be our controller. So we have a reference to our controller whenever we need it within this particular widget. So we might not need it, but always a handy thing to set up. And what we can say is we'll create a custom event, and this is going to keep, we can say build inventory grid. Okay, so this is going to build the left hand side, right? We'll keep these nice and separate. We'll create the grid on the left hand side and then we'll create the grid on the right hand side, so that we're not getting confused about what each of these actual events are doing. So in the first instance here, what we can do is we can say build inventory grid. Then we can create another custom event and we'll call it create, let's zoom in so you can see that a bit better. So it's going to be create a crafting grid. Okay, nice. And we probably want to refresh this at some point, because obviously our values are going to be changing all the time. Okay, but what we shall do in this case is we've got our GP inventory, okay, And for the sake of refreshing it, what we'll do is we'll remove this. Should have a remove all children, actually. That's a bit scary. Okay, let's not worry about that for the minute. As I said, we might create a refresh inventory grid as well, which fires every couple of seconds or something, just to refresh this, so that we've got the actual live quantities, because obviously if we fire this once, it's just going to do it once and then never update with our current values, which is why we want to clear this out. Let's type all, and what's it got for that? Get all children. It's got to get all children, so we might want to do that, right? And now we're going to use, because this is an array coming out, we don't know how many children for, so we're just going to use for each. Okay, so for the for each, and then we're just going to say remove from parent. Okay, so basically when we come in here, we're clearing this grid, okay, which is going to be, if I can pick the right one, oh, I'm losing it. It's going to clear this grid here, okay, which is, as you can see, not very big at the moment, but we can sort that out. So back to the grid, and we can basically, with our controller now, we can get the controller and we can say products available. We can get the products available, which is an array of the products and their quantity, and we can do a for each with this. This is going to come up complete, so once it's basically deleted all these, okay, and from here we are actually going to create a widget. We're going to create the widget, and it's going to be of the type inventory item, okay, which is this that we just created, okay. That's got no graph yet, so we can delete that. We are going to do some stuff on construction, so we'll save that for the moment, but we'll deal with that in a second. So we're going to put that in there, and on the inventory widget we're going to pass in this struct supply, okay. So we go in here and we create a variable and we call it struct, let's call it products, and it's going to be of the type struct supply, and it's going to be instance editable, and it's going to be expose on spawn. Now if you don't know what expose on spawn is, it means that when we do the create, when we create this and we refresh this node, you will see that we can actually plug this straight in, and there it's there. Okay, so we can set this variable while we actually set up the actual widget. Okay, so from there we need 2 more variables at least, right? And they're both going to be of the type integer. So we'll set these, and this is going to be count row, and this is going to be count column. Okay, so this is going to keep track of our which column we're in and which row we're in. Okay, so that we can set it properly in the grid. So when we build the graph, basically we're going to say set that and set that. So we're going to reset them back to 0 when we come in here. So what we're basically doing here is we're resetting our column count and column row so that we start at the beginning again. Then we're going to clear anything out of the grid that's already there so that we start afresh. Then we're going to get our products available to us, which is our current inventory. We're going to loop through them. Then for each one, we're going to create the inventory widget, right? And then once we've created the inventory widget, we are actually going to pull in our grid panel, and then we're going to add child. So we're going to add child to grid. Okay. So we're going to do that and that. Okay. And then we're going to pull in a column row. We're going to pull in our column count. And then we're going to tidy it up a bit. There we go. And then at the end of that, we're basically going to say get that. Then we're going to increment it. And we're going to have to decide how many rows and columns we're going to have. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say is greater than, actually, this is the column count. This should be the column count. Right? So we're going to increment the column count, and we're going to say if this is greater than 4, so we're going to get 5 columns. So we're going to get column 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if it's greater than 4, we're going to branch it. So if it's greater than 4, what we're going to do is we're going to increment this to move to the next row, okay? And finally, we're going to get our count column and reset it back to 0. Actually, we could have just done a set there. Right, okay, we'll do that then. And then that will set back to 0. So that will give us our individual rows and our individual columns, okay? So what this is basically going to do is it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, then it's going to hit here and refresh, go back to here and move down a row and then do the same again. And it's gradually going to fill it up, okay? Now in the end, what we actually might have to do is wrap this grid in a scroll bar, okay? Because if there gets to be too many items in here, then we obviously need to scroll down to see them. But anyway, in the meantime, let's do it. But what we need to do is we need a button to do it, okay? Now we already have a button on our controller that shows us something else. So what we can actually do is basically copy this. Okay, then we'll move this over a bit. This is all going to get destroyed. This is just for testing purposes. We'll click that and we select the key and we may as well make it I for inventory. Okay, and we are going to do inventory main and the same again, inventory main. Okay, well that's all rather interesting. So let's just delete that and redo it. So that's get all widgets of class. Let's go on the inventory main. Then we're going to do for each. Now there should only be one, but I'll just do this just in case. So we'll do that and pop that into remove from parent. And there we go. Right, so we do have one more issue here, which we need to deal with, and that is what to do with the individual inventory items. Okay, so we've brought our struct in and we're setting it on the creation of this widget, so we can get our structure and we've got our text and we haven't got the image. Okay, so what we do here is we need the text quantity, right? We get that, and we set text. Okay. And we're going to break this structure and we're going to put the quantity in here, and that's going to change it to the text for us, which is good. Then we're going to pull this off a bit. Now we need to do a little bit more work on this one. We need to return the value from the data table. Okay, so we know this is bauxite, Okay, so what we need to do is get a date table, and we need to return all the values. We can check this later if there's a quicker way around about this with the row. Okay, that's not going to do anything, so we're going to get data table row names, and this is going to come from DT items. Okay, then we're probably going to do data table individual row, and this is going to give us an idea of what this row name is, and it's basically a string, which is fine. We can, oh wait a minute, this is DT items, ingot gold, this is not what we want in actual fact, this is the wrong table. It could be product, but I don't think it is actually. I need to just check this. Right, this is the wrong table as well. So let's have a look at our, right, okay. So we need to look at our structs and data, except it's not in here. So we need to go to our recipes, and our recipes are, so DT items is this, and you'll notice here that we actually have the row name. So we can actually use a straight up row name in this. So in actual fact, we don't need to get all the data table names and loop through it. All we actually need to do is bring this out and then toString, and that gives us a friendly version, and plug it straight in there, right? And then we can break this and we can bring in our image, and then we can set the texture, set the brush from texture. And that's not going to, that doesn't help us in actual fact. We need to find out image mesh. So this is from DT items, okay? We changed it back to products, didn't we? Right, so this should be DT items. And refresh. Okay, what we'll do is we'll delete that and we shall pull this out again. Right, okay, whatever. We shall delete that and get data table row name. And this goes in here, and we break that, and then it gives us a mesh in the image. We pull in the mesh, sorry, the image, and then we place that back up here. Thank you, Yanko Babic. Don't know what I've made a good job of yet, but I think you're about to see. Right. So that should fill in the blanks for us, and we should now be able to try that and see what happens. So let's go. And if we press I, yay! We have our quantity of 20 and 20. The image isn't coming up for this one, don't know why. We can find out in a minute. Let's have a look at our DT items. Copper rich ore. Yeah, there's one thing we need to do here. And quite simply, all we actually need to do here is when we get the item and then we change it to a string, then we need to replace, right, now the replace is going to be a space and it's to nothing. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is remove any spaces. Because the row name cat doesn't have spaces but our actual description does, we can use this just to format it in the way that our actual data table stores it. So that should be correct. And it's not. Well, that is a bit weird. So we shall add a breakpoint here. And we shall try that again. So the first one's bauxite. And it's decided not to show us that again. So we'll do it again. So it's going to show us bauxite again. There. Resume, resume. And that says copper rich ore. But you'll notice that there's spaces in it. And that's because I didn't plug this in here. That was a bit of a goof. So we'll save that. Run it again. So we press this button, resume, resume, and now we should be able to hover over this, and as you can see there's no spaces anymore, which gives us a row name, which then should bring us back our image. There you go. So we obviously need to sort out sizes of these images. But you can see from our first little interaction that it is all working. So let's have a look at this designer. Our button is, I'm going to say fill. Our image is 32 by 32, which is not exactly what we want. So we'll go 100 by 100. This maybe doesn't even need to be a button. In fact, it probably doesn't, to be honest. But in the meantime, what we shall do is test it again. And there we go. we probably need a name here. So we might need a third text box to say name, then quantity can be on one line. So we could append these together basically, and then have the name of it. Or the alternative is like to put some sort of text on top of the image there, or whatever. But we really need a way to see that. So I'll tell you what we'll do. And go back to here. And so we have a text quantity. And we shall change that to just name. In fact, to make it a bit clearer, what we should do is we should call it product name. And then we obviously have the quantity. Okay? But what we're going to do with the quantity is we're going to do an append on this. So what we shall do is say append. And all this does is add text together, so that's all good. So in the first instance we can just put qty, then a hyphen, and then we can basically plug this in here. Okay. And our actual name, so our product name, and we're going to set text. Right, so we can just bang this over here. And then let's tidy this up a little bit. I'll put this in here. In fact, let's just put it at the end. Keep it nice and tidy, shall we? This is not looping anyway, so it's not of any bother to us, but we need to pull this row out before it actually hacks off the spaces, which is fine. So we can do it like that. So we can save that, and then we can test it out again and have a look to see what we've got. And the results are bauxite, copper-rich ore, and it is not appending, and we've got that kind of slightly big thing. And we are kind of stupid. Right? So we can put this in the right place. And that's to text. And then we can drag this across a bit and make it a bit more appealing. Okay. Get an OCD here on this. Okay, that's all a bit tidier. So let's save it and run it and try again and see how we're looking. Now we need to change the size of this. Let's hit I. And there we go, 20. And we probably need to change the size of these, or do something else to bring the size down a bit. We can probably do something with the padding, but for the designer of this, the image on inventory, are going to have the button. We're not probably going to have this button. So what in fact we can do is just put the button there and basically delete the button. Right, and our image is not going to be a fill, right? But we're going to wrap this in a canvas panel, right? And then the vertical is going to size to content. Then press play. And in here, and that's still not really giving us what we want. Right, let's have a look at this. Image no tile, which is what we want. In center, 100 by 100. That's what we want. We just want it as a nice square, thank you very much. There we go. No. Yeah, this is stretching out because of this. Right. So that's the issue here. Product name, what we can do is we can wrap that with a size box. And that should constrain it down, hopefully. Apparently it doesn't. Okay. A size box. Let's change that to fill. And this is going to be 100. Actually, the height override. We'll switch off the height override, and we shall run that. And let's see. See this text box. That's the product. Yeah, that is the product name, and we're raising it in a size box. I'm just wondering. I've done this before, but it doesn't seem to want to do it today. See, this is sizing properly, but this is not. Which is a bit weird. Okay. Are we going to worry about that too much? Probably not at the moment. Product name. We could bring that down, but that's really not gonna. That's not a serious solution here. We we are going to have to add a border to this, some description. Okay, on that point, I think what we'll do is we shall grab a 2-minute break, and then we shall be back to carry on. And in the meantime, I'll let you see it. Okay guys, we are back, and we're going to do a bit of a test here. Now some of these images might be empty, but what we want to do is go into our FE controller, go to our products available, and add basically a few items, okay, so that we can check that our whatchamacallit, we can check that our columns and our rows are working as expected. Okay, so we'll just add some weird numbers so that we get some weird numbers out. And we can have some iron ore. Add 323 of them for some reason. Then we can do what else do we have here? We have the copper rich ore, we have the iron, the copper sheet, and let's have a copper wire, that'll do it. And we can add 46 for no other reason than I feel like it. Right, so what we can do now is have a look at our grid, and there we go. There's our 5, there is our 5, and there is our beautiful, kinda. Okay. So what we're going to do now is turn it into something that looks a bit better. And I want to try this actually, so we may as well try it, right? So we've got our canvas panel, and then we've got our box, and our box, what we're going to do, actually, we've got our uniform grid, right? And what we can do is we can wrap this with a border, right? And this border, and we don't want the content, right? Because that will colour the content. But what we want is we want to turn this to nearly black, or that, or a tiny bit more, or let's go for a tiny bit more. Yeah, there, that'll do it. Okay, that. Okay, so that's good. So you'll see now, if we actually run it, we should have a background on our inventory, and there we go. Okay, we're going to worry about the spacing and the names shortly. So we can stop that, and what we're going to do is we're going to put some padding on our so here, let's wrap this with a canvas panel. Okay, and we can't really put padding on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to undo that, right? But we do want some sort of padding. So I tell you what, on our vertical box, what we can do is we can wrap with a border, right? And we can turn this blue. We're not doing the content, remember, we're just doing the background. So we can do it as a blue. And I'm not 100% keen on that yet. We're just testing it out. And then our vertical box, we have got a padding, right? So we can basically give it a padding of 10. and then that is going to give us an outline of the blue. Okay. Now, this isn't necessarily going to give us quite the finished effect that we want, but it gets us a bit closer, right? Because it's far too much padding on that, right? It is far too much. So we can change that to 5. Right, and there was something else I was going to do there, but I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, on the border, actually it was on the grid itself, wasn't it? But the grid does not give you, the problem is, the individual grid things do not give you a padding, except they do. No, that's for the whole thing, right? This is for the whole thing. It's not for the individual elements of the thing, right? So rather than muck around too much with that, right? Because you could muck about for hours with widgets. Right, so basically, if these are transparent, we don't really want that, right? We don't really want this at all. So, what I think we actually need to do is wrap that border in another border on the individual things, right? So this border would be wrapped with another border, right? And this border would in fact be the same colour as our border here, right? So this border here, we want to copy that colour, and then we want to put it in here, right? And that's going to give us the effect we want. It looks like padding, but it's actually a colour, and there you go. You see that? And now we're beginning to head closer to what we actually want, right? So, in actual effect now, this other border, we want that just black. And that's going to give us our final. And there we go. Or the other obvious way of doing it is we could make this border actually transparent, and then we could save that, and if we press play now, you'll see that we now have our individuals. We have our little spacing, coming from the border padding, but we're not blacking out, right? So there we go. We have our warehouse. Warehouse items. Okay, so the final step here, which we're not ever going to see or use probably, is if we go back to our main, our actual uniform grid, or sorry, our grid panel here is going to be wrapped with a scroll bar, which is a scroll box. Okay? So, if we press play now, you'll see that this actually doesn't do very much, because it won't actually have reached. Now, once this reaches the bottom of the page, or the bottom of the widget, this would actually add a scroll bar to the right, and we could scroll up and down the different items. But since it doesn't. Okay, so we're done with that. And now what we can do is do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now the code is going to be very, very similar. Right? So what we'll do is basically we've got our GP inventory there, so we're on our main. Go back to our designer, and what we can do is we've got GP crafting, and that's going to be a variable, so we'll save that. And if we go back to your graph, you'll see that it is now coming here. So fundamentally what we can do is we want to reset again all our counters, okay? And we can paste that back to here. Now we're going to change what tables and stuff these come from, but fundamentally everyone's going to stay much the same. Except we're going to come from GP crafting. So we're going to replace that. And then we're going to delete that. We're going to replace that to look nice, kinda. Okay. Then this isn't going to be used, okay? So what we're actually going to do is we're going to get data table rows, 2, 3. We're going to get data table row names. And then we're not going to do that, but what we're going to do is we're going to get items. Okay. And then we're going to say for each so we're just going to replace the parts that we need to. So this is going to basically go in here, then to here, right? And then the for each is going to get a data table row name, right? That's going to go in there. Then that is going to go in there. Okay. Now this is actually going to be slightly different, but in the meantime we'll swap things around a little bit. That's going to get deleted, which is fine. That's going to go in there, and it doesn't like that because we haven't selected the items. Okay, we're going to keep continuing with that. So what we'll do is we'll remove that, and we'll bring this down here, and we may create a new widget for this, but we don't actually need to create the widget for this. What we can actually do is we do, because we need this to be a button so that you can click on it. Alright, okay, whatever. As I said, we can still do this, or we can create an identical one and then wrap the image with the button. Let's keep it simple, guys. So let's go back down to our inventory, right? And we shall duplicate this, except we're not going to call it inventory item. We're going to call it crafting item. Now we could have used inventory item, to be honest, right? But let's keep it simple, right? So that's going to be that. But what we're going to do is, with the image, we're going to wrap that with a button. Okay? And the button is going to be button craft. And the image is going to be this. Actually, is it? Yeah, the actual image itself is not. The button itself, we're not going to put the image in here, right? We're going to keep the button separate, okay? So we'll save that. And we shall change this image recipe name to image craft, just to keep things in line, right? So if we now go back to our inventory, we are going to create, we're going to cut this, right? We know we don't want to do that, but we do want to do this, right? But this is going to change, and this is going to be crafting item. Okay, now notice we've still got the products thing. That's probably going to have to change as well, but in the meantime, we can do something, put that there and save that. Now our out row, we can break that. Okay, so we've got item, category, image and mesh. Is that going to give us enough for this? I'll tell you what, we've got the Dewey crafting, okay? We don't really need the text quantity, right? So let's, right, I'll tell you what we'll do. Where we do the text quantity, what we can do is basically delete that. Then we can move this along and we can delete that, and we can make that a bit smaller. We can move this in. Okay. And we can now go to designer. Right, wait a minute. Save that. Go to designer. And now we can delete this. Right? Now our product name okay. We're getting our items for our items, which is fine. So we can definitely use this, right? Now we're not going to do that, but what we are going to do is change this to a right. We're not going to use this. Okay, and we're not going to use this. We are going to use the image. Okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this to an image. Image. Oh. That's texture 2D. Do text 2D. And then what we'll do is we'll say product image. Okay. And we'll add another variable and we'll call it product name. And that's going to be a string. Okay. Now both of these we're going to make instance editable and spawn expose on spawn. That's expose on spawn anyway, so that's fine. Compile that. Is it going to compile? Come on. Okay, it compiled. Right. And basically what we're going to do is our product name is going to go in here. And our image is going to go in there. Okay. So that's image craft. It's going to go in there. So that can stay as it is. Right? So we can move this along a bit. Save that. And then when we go into here, there, we get our crafted image. And what we can do is you'll notice that the product name and product image are there for us now. And basically we can drag out and our item is going to get changed into the product name and our image will go into the image. Let's give that a go, shall we? And it's done absolutely nothing. And that is rather obvious because we didn't actually call this particular create crafting grid. Okay, so we create crafting grid, and we're actually going to rename it to build crafting grid because we want to keep things kind of the same naming conventions. So we'll change this to build crafting grid. Save that, and this one should have changed. Build crafting grid. Okay. And there we go. Now it's not bringing, it's bringing back every item, right? Because that's what we asked it to do. And it's overlapping a bit, so what we need to do to fix that is if we go to designer and then we get this thing, and then we can size the content, right? If we do size to content, it's going to make it that bit bigger. Except obviously it's not, because these things never do exactly what you tell them to. Okay. But that's looking like a decent start. So on that, it's time for a comfort break, and I shall be back in very shortly indeed. Stick around, guys. Okay guys, we're back and we're going to tidy this up a bit. So, let's tidy it up. What we can do is we can take our canvas panel and we can make this 266, 266. Save that. Does that save our issue for the moment? Yes, it does. There we go. We have a we probably need to make these actually smaller, but they are operating as I expected. Now, the thing here is we've got this vertical box, okay? Now, or at least we have this uniform grid, and then we have this. So let's do something here. We want to wrap this with a vertical grid, a vertical box, sorry. Okay. And this vertical box is going to be fill, but what we're going to do is we are going to add a horizontal box to the bottom of this so that we've got space for our button. Okay, so it's going to go in here, and we're going to give it a padding of let's say 25. And we may actually need another horizontal box here, right? Because we need our buttons for crafting here, and then we could actually put a button in here for the close, right? So let's try and do that. Button, right? So we're going to do a button and we stick it in the bottom here, and we're going to stick it in the middle, right? And then we're going to add some text to it. Okay. And the text is basically going to say close. And then we're going to change it to our font that we're using. Now, this horizontal button, we're actually, the padding from the top, from the bottom is not going to be 25. It's going to be more like 10. Okay. And the button background color is going to be, let's say, a blue. Okay. And now, in our other horizontal box, which is going to align to the right, we can actually put another button here. Now we can add all our stuff to this. Okay, and we can basically say craft, except that's craft. Okay, so with that in mind, we can press play, we can hit inventory, and we have our craft button, and we have our close button. Okay, now this craft button needs to be indented, but in theory it is working. Okay, so that's working pretty well. It's got this pattern on it, so we could turn that to 0 and say 0 padding. Then if we have a look at it in here, yeah, we probably want to add a bit of padding, but in theory it's working, right? This is a button, as you can see it's a button, changes colour, etc. And these are buttons, as you can see these are changing colour. So that's good. So all in all, we have a decent start on our inventory. So we can close it, we can open it, we can close it and open it. And what we can do here is, if we look at our graph, and you'll notice here it says build craft and build inventory. Now that is our initial thing. What we can do here is say set timer by function name. Then we can update this over time, let's say 3 seconds, and we can set that to looping, and we can say build inventory grid. Okay, now it isn't actually going to add, darn it. Right, okay, so it isn't actually going to have spaces in it. Now that's going to loop. We don't need to loop on the build crafting because the build crafting does not change, but we might have to if we actually enable and disable these. Okay, so we may need to actually set this to timer as well, so that it actually refreshes the whole thing. But in the meantime, we want to test it to see if it actually does update. Okay, so we're not going to get that from our initial setup, so we are going to need to find we're going to need to mine something. Okay, but that's all we need. All we need is a miner to set up, and we are in business. Now you'll notice I've made a change to the rocket. The rocket now, once it starts getting further away, it then loses. So it looks like it's losing contact, and then the feed stops, which is exactly the way I wanted it to work, which is fine. And similarly, when it comes back into land, we shall take a look. It's got the feedback on it, and as it comes into land, you get a clear picture. And then it disappears. Okay, so that's kind of how we wanted it, and that's kind of how it does it. So we're kind of happy with that. So let's build our conveyor belt. Okay, so we should now get a product. Don't know what it is, we can check. It's bauxite. Okay, so we're getting bauxite. So if we click on our inventory, our bauxite starts going up, as you see. 26, 29, now I don't think it's clearing it's not clearing, right? It is not clearing our grid. So this is not doing it. Okay, so we need this. This is the thing we needed. And we can plug that in there. And we can delete this. That's what I was looking for before. Okay. So we can basically join this back up. And we can basically do the same thing here. Clear children. Okay, so this can go in here, and this can go underneath here to tidy it up. Pull that down, then we can pull this down, and if we do need to update the crafting grid, then we've got the proper thing. Okay, so we need to basically do the same thing again here, but that doesn't take long. If these guys find some miners or some minerals, do we have, there's a mineral up there. If this guy goes all the way, he's actually done it, which is cool. Alright, so we'll just use this one then. How are you guys today? Let me know how you're doing, what you're working on. Okay. There we go. So we have our product coming in, and that product is copper rich ore. So we should see this one going up. Let's see if it does. There we go, 22, 25, 28, and it's all much clearer now. So that's working very well. So what we can do is we can go to our main inventory, okay, and we can go to our designer, and then we shall actually go to our button and rename it to the proper thing, which should be BTN close, which is button close. And we'll do the same while we're at it for the button craft. So this is going to be BTN craft. Okay. And then what we do is we click on that, then we can say on clicked, and basically we can say remove from parent, and it's ourself, and that does that. So now when we click close, it will remove that. And let's try that just to make sure. So press I, press close, beautiful. Okay, so that's a good start. Now the one thing we want to do here is we want to stop it and go to designer, and in the grid we've got the vertical box here, right, and we've got that wrapped in a scroll box. What we want to do is the same with the crafting, so we want to wrap that with scroll box. Okay, so if this becomes too big, then it's also going to scroll, so I don't think we'll see it right now, but yeah, we need one more thing in here. Right, so I think we can set something up, right? We can set something up, surely. Don't call me surely. Right, so what we'll do is we shall go back to our recipes, right? We'll double click on it, that items, and if we add, and then let's call this super, well actually we need to add it to items first, so we'll do that first, right? And this is going to be super, let's call it supercomputer. Okay, so that's another thing we can make. And then in our DT items, this is going to be a supercomputer. And basically for the row name, we just take spaces out and we call it supercomputer. Okay, and category would be a fabricator. We want an image, so that'll do it. And we don't need a mesh, so we'll just save it as that because we're never going to create it. What we're doing here is testing the scroll bar. So that when we actually play and press I, that's not exactly what we wanted. so we've got an issue there, that it is not scrolling. Okay, so it's in GP inventory. Okay, so let's not set that to full, right? And let's set that and see how that goes for us, okay? I'm still not 100% about this. Yeah, we've not got a scroll there. I think it's because this GP inventory right, let's do something completely wacky, right? We shall get this and we shall add some serious padding, right? So let's say we add 200 to the top. Well, that's a bit much. So we'll add that, and then from the bottom we say 100, right? We save that and run it. And let's see what that does to our padding and scroll bar. And it appears that our scroll bar just doesn't want to do it. Right, so hang on a second here. Scroll box. Yeah, that's what we want. I was just wondering if it's called something slightly different now. Okay. Whatever. But one can see from here that our thing is working well. Or at least the basics of it are working well. Right, so what we'll do is we'll go back and this is actually going to be 0. And this is going to be how it is. So let's have a look at a couple of things that I've fixed, okay? So last night, I noticed that when you fired probes, it basically didn't do it properly. So I have updated this to basically redo this, and if you right click, it clears. Right, and if you actually click it again, it clears. And if you actually rotate, it rotates the grid to the right thing. Okay, and also the same for the grid. Now the issue here is that you can't rotate once you've actually set this. So probably the next thing we're going to do is get this to work, that you can still rotate, and I think it's basically because your current state is not normal, so doesn't allow you to rotate for some reason, but we're going to have to check that out. And as I said, the other thing was here we are showing our, now on the grid, if you right click it doesn't disappear, so I think we need to set that up. Now is that, yeah, it's going to be in here I believe. And here we have the right clicks. So we've obviously not got anything for right click here. Okay. But fundamentally it's going to be very similar to the right click on the Pro. We need to stop it at this point. Yeah, let's just zoom in a bit. Right, and basically we're going to do the same thing, except with the grid complete. So what we can do is we can look at menu buttons, and that'll give us the exact thing we want to do here. If we can find the menu button, there it's there. Right, so it's basically this. Right, well let's see, actually it's not, it's actually this. Okay, so if we copy that and then go back to our controller, we should be able to just paste this in. And then we can drag this one up. We can plug it in here. And plug it back in here. And there we go. So now we should have just fixed oh, I'm guessing that's to do with the controller. And indeed it is. Do we have a controller? Oh, we don't actually need a controller. Okay. So we are in the controller, so we just say basically current state. That's not that one. So let's go straight to the bottom. Is it game state? Oh, we should be able to do that. Right. So let's do the bleeding obvious, shall we? So we can save that. And that should now clear our grid. So we can clear it with the button, or we can clear it with, so obviously that clears it. And now we can right click and it clears it. So that's a lot easier for the player. We should really turn these into functions so everything's a bit cleaner, which we may do, but not right now. In fact, we probably should do that. So what you can do is you can right click on this and say collapse the function. And this is going to be remove grid. So when we do these things, we can do the same here. Collapse this to a function. And we can say remove probes. And now these are kind of stored out the way a bit. And that looks a hell of a lot better, to be honest. Now we can collapse all of these into a certain function as well. This one's a little bit more complicated, but we could still do it to a degree. So we can save that. And at that point, guys, I think I'm going to leave it for today. I'm going to do a bit of tidying up of this boring stuff. Take it from there. Stuff that really isn't very interesting to be watching. But fundamentally, that tidies those two nodes up a bit, right? We could have not collapsed it. The other way we could have done this is we could have actually just did like copied that. We'll copy this for the moment. We can always remove it, right? Paste it back in here. Okay, and then what we could have done is actually just collapse nodes, and then that would have given us one nice thing. We'd also done it like that, rather than created lots of different nodes. But we've got it in a function right now. And as I said, this stops the functions getting too big, but it also keeps the blueprint tidier. So we'll save that for now. Okay, and I'm just going to show you the two different versions, right? So if what we do is we say paste again, and we move this to here, right, and then we collapse it, you can see that it's going to say remove, if I can spell right for a minute, grid. It's not going to allow us to name it that. Right, so we'll say that, and then that's the difference, right? So what we could do is we could delete that, we can delete that, then we should be able to rename this. Okay, so that's the alternatives for tidying up a blueprint. And on that point, guys, we are going to call it a day. I'll be back later on in 4 hours time or so, and we shall carry on. And if you've enjoyed the stream, thank you very much, and check out the description for various links to Discord servers, Patreons, etc, etc, etc. You get the picture. So please subscribe, and I shall catch you all on the next one. Bye bye for now.